Hey, thanks for coming into the channel. Let's talk about hyper-personalized campaigns and why is it important um more and more in today's marketing environment, right? Um, we'll go through some examples. We'll try and understand what are hyper-personalized campaigns and how could we achieve that. Um, so first, let's get started with um, trying to understand what are hyper-personalized campaigns. Right? Now, if you look at any communication or a campaign targeting our audience, we need to start with a set of targeted audience, prospects, or customers, right? Now, the normal way of communicating with your potential audience is try and analyze your audience by their demographics, by their personas, and then you try and create a content journey to reach them across different channels or probably based on preferred channel and so on. Now, hyper-personalization is trying to understand the behavioral and the intent pattern about your audience or the personas you're trying to reach so that you can create a hyper-personalized communication journey or content journey for them. Now, why is it important? Because for the audience or the recipient, the piece of communication that they receive from you is tailor made for them. It is value driven communication for them, right? So they try and relate with a lot better, they resonate with the content a lot better than a generalized content. Now, in essence, hyper personalization is about understanding your audience, understanding your personas, beyond their business card information possible, trying to understand their intent, behavioral patterns, and grouping them into lookalike audience so you can create a personalized journey at scale. Now that's important, right? The grouping them into identical pockets so you can create a hyper-personalized journey at scale. Now, this leads to a concept called micro campaigns. It's slightly prevalent in the consumer marketing through influencer marketing, but this also is applicable to the B2B space as well. Now, in order to understand micro campaigns, we need to understand the top of the funnel mega or macro campaigns, which is usually a broadcast, one to many kind of broadcast communication, which is the hoardings, the social posts and videos, which are usually not personalized at an individual level or at a lookalike audience or segment level, right? So usually, it can be only a top of the funnel content because it's too generic. It is still valid for every set of the audience or personas that we're trying to target. But then as we get deeper into the funnel, we need to be able to bring personalization and hyper personalization into our content journey. Now, that is where micro campaigns come into play. Essentially, micro campaigns is about grouping the audience into lookalike pockets or lookalike segments or lookalike clusters so we can now understand what we already know about them, also look into their last 90 days, 120 days, 190 days of historic pattern, content journey, the content consumption history, the intent pattern. So leveraging some of these dynamic data points to create lookalike clusters and reach them with the meaningful content that drives value for them. In return, we are coming through as a content player that is actually creating hyper-personalized content at scale. Now, that's essentially what the micro campaigns are about. Now, in a quick second, what really are micro campaigns, right? So if you look at um, from top of the funnel, which is a broad generic content which is valid for pretty much every audience that we try to reach, which is a mass market kind of a broadcast communication, to getting to mega to macro to micro. The experience of a customer or an audience or a persona that we're trying to reach is magnified the moment we're talking micro campaigns, because everybody feels that this piece of communication is curated for them. They relate with it, they resonate with it, so everybody feels connected with the content or the piece of communication that you've been sending them now, and that establishes trust, that creates better experience for them. So now you have a chance of actually being heard versus just being treated as a mass communication player or somebody that's trying to broadcast to generate piece of information that people can't relate with. And to quickly summarize, hyperpersonalization, um, what are the essentials? What do we need to keep in mind to get down to a hyper-personalized communication or hyper-personalized campaign? Now, it starts with an actionable data set that can actually get you reach into your total addressable market, right? Um, Data plays a very important role in every piece of communication that you plan on. It's like a foundation on top of which you probably build a multi-story building in the weeks, months to come, right? So actionable data, which enables reaching to your total addressable market. So understanding your total addressable market, making sure the data is cleansed, data is actionable. These are the basics, right? And then clustering the data based on lookalike audience. So this is where we spoke about the micro campaigns, the grouping of audience based on what you already know about them, trying to understand and look into the last 90 days, 120 days, 180 days of content consumption history, historic patterns, behavioral patterns, skill sets, education, the keywords that they've liked or commented on their social channels. So we kind of try then can relate with what kind of keywords can we be using in our content. Um, that's more likely for a certain group of recipient to be active on and so on, right? So we call this active audience targeting or precision marketing. So essentially grouping your data into multiple clusters of lookalike audience, right? So scale is not a problem today. We are actually living in a world where we are dealing with abundance of data. So assuming hypothetically, let's say your total addressable market is roughly about 500,000 people, you cannot create a content journey or you cannot create a hyper-personalized campaign without breaking the 500,000 contacts into smaller clusters of lookalike audience. And that could be a cluster of probably 25, 50,000 each to start with. And then, as we go deeper and deeper into the nurturing, we can actually break them down to further smaller pieces. So every step in the process, as we start reaching out to or communicating to the audience, we need to start learning about them as well based on, when are they active on, what devices are they consuming our content on, what kind of keywords are actually giving us better results, what kind of call to actions are giving better results. So based on that, every step in the process, grouping the audience into smaller and smaller clusters so we can further create a very hyper-personalized content journey for them is the key. So that kind of talks us about the personalized content journey that I spoke about, and then personalized CTAs. Again, we cannot have a generalized CTA based on different groups or different stages of audience that we're dealing with, and we'll probably touch on that a little more. Stage-based nurturing, and then finally, it's probably better to have an omni-channel marketing or communication versus a multi-channel or a single channel, and we'll talk about what they mean in a few minutes. So first of all, engaging the total addressable market, right? So it starts with a clean data. It starts with a data set that actually resonates well with the kind of audience and prospects that you want to reach, and it eliminates the one that you do not want to. And then within your total addressable market, trying to understand using the data sets, the serviceable obtainable market and the serviceable addressable market, and what kind of content journeys can we create for them, right? So moving on, now once we start with the larger data set, how do we build a lookalike audience data set, right? So that's based on what we know about them in terms of their intent, behavior, content consumption history, the device that they've been active on, the channel that they've been active on, the skill sets, and the keywords that they've been active on recently. That's how you start to create groups or clusters of lookalike audience. And then from that point onwards, every communication that you send, you will also need to be looking into clicks and open patterns, the timing, the topics, and then further be able to understand from those campaigns and group more and more people into smaller clusters based on the dynamic data points that you would generate from every piece of communication that you would send. Now, creating a personalized content journey, right? Now, this talks about as we move further in the program, we're going to have smaller clusters of audience, right? So we probably, when we start in this example, let's say, your total addressable market is 500,000 people, and we started off breaking them into smaller clusters of about 50,000 lookalike audience. But then what would happen is, as in when you move further into the communication program, 50,000 is going to get smaller and smaller into lookalike audience clusters, because that's how deep we would start to know and learn about the audience, right? Which is a good thing. And that's where the hyper-personalization comes in. Now, we need to be able to understand how much do we know about our audience at a certain point, and how much do our audience know about us, because we've been communicating with them for some time now. So depending on how much our audience know about us, we need to be able to continue the journey from that point onwards in terms of the content journey. And that's why it's very important for us to create a personalized content journey for each of the clusters that we're going to break into, and not really have a generic content journey, because otherwise we might be feeding the same content to the audience over and over and again, which leads nowhere. And at some point, we would actually lose the audience and lose the nurturing that we have done. So it's important that knowing where our audience are, knowing what we already know about them, understanding what they know about us by then, and then based on that, creating a personalized content journey for different stages or different clusters of audience. Likewise, each of these, personalized or hyper-personalized content journey must also have relevant call to actions for different stages of audience. We cannot have a top of the funnel call to action at the bottom of the funnel kind of content, and likewise, a segment of the audience that have been already fed with multiple communications from the brand. We know that they've been responsive and interacting with the brand. We cannot have a generic call to action included in piece of communication for them. Versus, we are actually starting to ingest new data sets and actually are feeding a generic brand related content to a certain section or cluster of audience. We cannot have a deep down last stage of the funnel or the bottom of the funnel kind of a call to action, right? So relevant call to action based on the stage is important as well. And then comes stage-based nurturing, right? Which is important as well. Now, why? Usually, we just talk about nurturing, but then let me actually explain to you what stage-based nurturing is. See, at any given point in time, when we're starting off with a sizable audience, um, one of the key factors, despite creating a hyper-personalized campaign, one of the key factors of them becoming a customer is timing. In most cases, even if everything else checks in and the timing doesn't check, uh, they might be interested. There might be a potential customer in the future, but not really a paid customer at this moment, right? Now, the only thing that stands between them being a customer in the future versus losing them to the competition is nurturing. They need to be constantly fed valuable information, relevant information that makes sense to them in order for them to evaluate us, remember us, and come back to us when the timing is right. In order to do that, we need to understand, excluding the contacts of personas or individuals or audience that have already responded to our brand communication or already converted and become a customer. The rest of them, we need to be able to feed them into a nurturing pool. And the nurturing can usually be once a month, twice a month, depending on the stage of the funnel that we are in. Um, and how would you segment them into top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, or bottom of the funnel, nurturing contacts or prospects? That's based on how much of content have they already consumed from us. That gives us an indication of how well do they know us, and how well do we know about them? And based on the data sets, based on the campaigns that we have run so far. So based on that, if they haven't consumed a lot of content from the brand yet, we will put them into top of the funnel. If they consumed a little bit of content from the brand, not really gotten to a stage of competitive advantage or battle cards and so on, then we would put them into a middle of the funnel nurturing. And then the ones that are actually ready to buy, but timing is an essence, and that's the only reason the purchase didn't happen. We would actually put them into a bottom of funnel content and create personalized content journey for each of these stages. So we don't want to feed a top of the funnel content here into a highly nurtured, engaged contact that we might actually come to as a company that's spamming them and lose them. And likewise, the opposite of that, we don't want to send a bottom of the funnel content to a lead that's still trying to understand the brand and trying to understand what they're offering, right? So here was an example of the stage-based nurturing. So preferably omni-channel communication is what we recommend. And what does it mean? What is a multi-channel marketing, cross-channel marketing, and omni-channel marketing, right? So essentially, all of these three examples here are three terms, three different types of communication and marketing does make use of different channels. That could be email, social, retargeting, display ads, and so on, calls and SMS and so on, right? But then the way you will leverage and use these different channels makes the difference, right? So in case of a multi-channel marketing, you're still reaching them on multiple channels, but these channels are disconnected. In case of cross-channel marketing, you're using the same channels, but now the channels are connected. Now, in case of an omni-channel marketing, you're not just connected, you're interconnected. So you're continuing the journey from where you left, creating a seamless experience for the recipient, which is more important, right? So today we are living in a world where, both in B2B and B2C cases, we have our recipients actually learning about our brand from different devices, from the largest of the screens like laptops and desktops to the smallest of the screens like iPads and mobile phones. Now, how do we create a journey that's seamless and interconnected is a key, and that's what the omni-channel marketing is. So yeah, I think that kind of gives a broad understanding of what hyper-personalized campaigns are, how can we create hyper-personalized campaigns, how can we leverage the data to know beyond the business card information, how can we look into the last 90 days, 120 days, 180 days of interaction and engagement, build models to be able to build look-like audience, and then go for hyper-personalized micro campaigns, which is certainly the key. Every recipient in today's world want to be felt special, and the way you would make them, feel special, heard, is through delivering them a content that they feel is tailor-made for them, a custom curated for them, because now you're delivering value through every piece of communication. And that's how you would engage with the audience and kind of convert them from cold prospects into warm prospects onto engaged audience and then customers and then evangelists, right? So I think, yeah, that's for today, and that's about hyper personalized campaigns. Do like and subscribe to the channel if you like the content. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Cheers.